The bus came to a screeching halt, and Sam's eyes widened in shock. A little girl was sprinting toward the bus, her arms flailing and her face streaked with tears. She wasn't just late. She was desperate, terrified. As Sam opened the door, she stumbled inside, her tiny body trembling. "Please, don't let him get me," she whispered, clutching her backpack like it was her only protection. Her voice was barely audible, but her fear was deafening. Sam's heart pounded as he realized this was no ordinary morning. Something was terribly wrong. Before we dive deeper into this chilling story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Sam, a dependable school bus driver in his late 40s, was known for his steady demeanor and kind heart. He had driven the same route for years, greeting students with a warm smile every morning. But today, as he looked at Delilah, a quiet 8-year-old who rarely spoke more than a few words, something about her frantic entrance left him unsettled. Delilah sat at the front of the bus, her small hands trembling as they gripped the straps of her oversized backpack. Her eyes darted nervously toward the window, as if expecting someone to appear out of nowhere. Sam knelt beside her, his voice calm but laced with concern. "Delilah," he said softly, "you're safe now. Can you tell me what's going on?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. "I can't go back there," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He said he'd hurt me if I told anyone." Sam's stomach churned as he noticed faint bruises peeking out from under the sleeves of her coat. The pieces began to fall into place, and a deep sense of urgency washed over him. He couldn't just let this slide. Trying to mask the rising unease in his chest, Sam gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing by coming to me, Delilah. No one's going to hurt you while you're here. I promise." But even as he said the words, he knew this wasn't going to be easy. He quickly grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the school counselor. Miss Hall, a seasoned professional who had seen her share of tough cases, picked up immediately. As Sam explained the situation, her tone turned serious. "Delilah's been on my radar for a while," Miss Hall admitted, "but I never had anything concrete to act on. This changes everything. I'll contact Child Protective Services right away. Keep her with you, and don't let her out of your sight." Hanging up, Sam turned back to Delilah, who sat huddled in the front seat, her knees drawn up to her chest. "We're going to get you the help you need," he said firmly, though his own thoughts raced with questions. Who was hurting her? And how had it been allowed to go on this long? Sam completed his route, dropping off the rest of the students while keeping a watchful eye on Delilah, who stayed huddled in the front seat. Every now and then, her gaze flickered to the window, her small frame tense with fear. The sight gnawed at Sam. Whatever had driven her to this state wasn't ordinary. When the bus finally pulled into the school parking lot, Miss Hall was already waiting, her expression grave. As Sam helped Delilah down the steps, the little girl clung to his arm, her grip firm and desperate. "Please don't make me go back," she whimpered, her voice cracking. Miss Hall crouched to Delilah's level, her tone soft but firm. "Delilah, you're so brave for speaking up. We're going to make sure you're safe, but we need you to help us understand what's going on." Delilah hesitated, her eyes darting between Sam and Miss Hall. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's my dad," she said. "He gets so mad. And when Mommy left, he said if I ever told anyone, he'd hurt me too." Sam's jaw tightened as a chill ran through him. The faint bruises on her wrists and her trembling hands painted a picture far worse than he had imagined. Miss Hall exchanged a glance with him, the unspoken weight of the revelation passing between them. "We need to call CPS right now," Miss Hall said firmly. "This isn't just a school issue, it's a police matter." But before they could proceed, Delilah's small voice broke through. "He'll know I told," she whispered. "He always knows." Sam knelt beside her, his weathered hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Delilah," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you while you're here. Not me, not Miss Hall, not anyone." The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach her, and she gave a hesitant nod. But her fear remained palpable, her wide, tear-filled eyes constantly glancing toward the door, as if expecting her father to burst through at any moment. Hours later, after Delilah was placed in the temporary care of a foster family, Sam found himself unable to shake the image of her tear-streaked face and trembling hands. His gut told him this wasn't over. Something about the way she spoke, the way she looked over her shoulder, hinted at a darkness far worse than anyone had imagined. Later that night, as Sam drove past the Carter house on his way home, he spotted movement in the driveway. Squinting through the dim light, he saw Delilah's father, Todd, hunched over the trunk of his car, wrestling with a heavy duffel bag. Sam parked discreetly, his instincts kicking in. Todd's movements were frantic, his eyes darting nervously around the quiet neighborhood. Sam's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He wasn't a cop. He couldn't just storm in. But he also couldn't ignore what he was seeing. Grabbing his phone, he dialed an old friend, Detective Mike Anders. "Mike, I need your help," Sam said, his voice low but urgent. "It's about one of the kids on my route. Her name's Delilah Carter, and I think her dad's up to something." Mike's tone turned serious. "What do you mean?" Sam explained what he'd seen, his voice steady despite the tension building in his chest. "This isn't just a case of a bad temper, Mike. I think it's worse than anyone knows." "Stay put," Mike said firmly. "I'll run his name and see what comes up, but don't do anything reckless." As Sam hung up, he kept his eyes fixed on the Carter house, his pulse pounding. Deep down, he knew this was just the beginning, and that Delilah's safety depended on what he did next. The next morning, Sam's phone buzzed just as he was about to begin his bus route. It was Detective Anders. "Sam, you were right," Mike said, his tone grim. "Todd Carter's got a sealed record, domestic violence, assault charges from years back. CPS is filing for an emergency warrant. I'm heading to the Carter house now. You should stay clear of this." But staying clear was the last thing on Sam's mind. He couldn't shake the image of Delilah's tear-streaked face, her whispered words. "He'll know I told." Something told him that time was running out. Later that day, Anders and a team of officers arrived at the Carter house, warrant in hand. Todd opened the door with a strained smile, his eyes darting between the officers and the unmarked cars parked on the street. "What's this about?" he said, his voice teetering between forced politeness and thinly veiled anger. "We're here to conduct a search, Mr. Carter," Anders said firmly, holding up the warrant. Todd's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside, his posture stiff. "You won't find anything," he snapped. As officers combed through the house, Laura Jenkins from CPS joined the search, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. The house was immaculate, too immaculate. The faint smell of bleach hung in the air, and the carpet in the living room looked freshly cleaned. Then they found the basement door. Todd immediately tensed. "There's nothing down there," he said quickly, stepping in front of it. "We'll decide that," Anders replied. He motioned for an officer to unlock it. As the door creaked open, a wave of cold, stale air rushed out. The officers descended the narrow stairs, their flashlights cutting through the dim light. The basement was cluttered with boxes and old furniture, but something didn't sit right. "Detective, over here," one of the officers called out. Anders moved toward the far wall, where the officer had discovered a loose panel. Behind it was a hidden compartment. Inside, they found a bundle of items, blood-stained rags, a broken bracelet, and crumpled drawings eerily similar to the ones Delilah had sketched in her notebook. Anders's stomach sank. "Document everything," he ordered, his voice tight. The search continued, and when they opened a locked closet, they found something that confirmed their worst fears, a duffel bag containing Sarah Carter's personal belongings, her driver's license, credit cards, and a scarf Delilah had mentioned in one of her rare moments of vulnerability. Todd's face twisted with anger as the evidence piled up. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're trying to frame me." Anders stepped forward, his voice calm but cold. "The evidence speaks for itself, Todd. You're under arrest for the suspected murder of Sarah Carter and the endangerment of Delilah Carter." Todd lunged toward Anders, his face red with fury, but officers restrained him, pinning his arms behind his back. As they led him out of the house, the neighborhood gathered outside, murmuring in shock and disbelief. Meanwhile, Sam sat in his parked bus, his hands gripping the steering wheel. His phone buzzed with a message from Anders. "We got him. Delilah's safe now." Sam exhaled, relief washing over him, but his mind lingered on Delilah's words. He always knows. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. Todd Carter sat in the sterile confines of an interrogation room, his once confident demeanor replaced by anger and desperation. Across the table, Detective Anders laid out the evidence: the blood-stained rags, Sarah Carter's belongings, and the chilling drawings hidden in the basement. Todd's voice cracked as he protested, "It wasn't me!" "She left. She walked out. This is all a misunderstanding." Anders leaned forward, his tone sharp but controlled. "The evidence tells a different story, Todd. The blood in the basement? It's Sarah's. The belongings you hid? They don't lie. You can keep playing innocent, but the walls are closing in." Outside the precinct, Sam waited anxiously, his mind racing with everything that had unfolded. Laura Jenkins approached, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Delilah is safe," she said softly. "She's with her foster family now. She's still scared, but she's starting to open up. She even asked if you could visit her." Sam felt a lump rise in his throat. "Of course, anything she needs." At the foster home, Delilah sat at the kitchen table with her foster mother, Claire, a warm and nurturing woman who had been doing everything to make Delilah feel safe. As Claire braided her hair, Delilah's small voice broke the silence. "Do you think he'll come for me?" she asked, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Claire stopped for a moment, her hands gently resting on Delilah's shoulders. "No, sweetheart. He can't hurt you anymore. You're safe here, and you'll always have people looking out for you." When Sam arrived later that day, Delilah ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I'm so glad you're here, Mr. Sam," she whispered. He knelt down, holding her close. "I promised you, didn't I? You're safe now, and I'm not going anywhere." Back at the precinct, Anders and Laura reviewed the case, their conversation heavy with the weight of what they'd uncovered. "Delilah's testimony sealed it," Laura said, her voice tinged with both pride and sorrow. "She's been through so much, but she's stronger than anyone realizes." Anders nodded. "Kids like her remind us why we do this. Todd's going away for a long time, but the real victory is giving her a chance at a new life." The Carter house, once a symbol of secrecy and fear, now stood empty, its facade a hollow shell of the horrors it had concealed. Weeks passed, and Delilah began to settle into her new life. The once fearful little girl who clung to her backpack and avoided eye contact was slowly transforming into a child who smiled more often and spoke with newfound confidence. The nightmares still came, but they were less frequent, and she always woke to the reassuring presence of her foster mother, Claire. Sam visited Delilah regularly, often bringing small gifts, a book, a puzzle, or her favorite, a stuffed animal. On one visit, she handed him a drawing she had made. It was simple but powerful. A bright yellow school bus with two figures standing beside it. One was Delilah, smiling wide. The other was Sam, a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I made it for you," she said shyly, watching his face light up. "You saved me." Mr. Sam's throat tightened, but he managed a smile. You're the brave one, Delilah. I just did what anyone should. At the precinct, Detective Anders and Laura Jenkins wrapped up the final pieces of the case. Todd Carter, now facing charges of second-degree murder and child endangerment, had confessed under the weight of irrefutable evidence. His trial had become a formality, and the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, offered a measure of justice for Sarah and safety for Delilah. Laura sighed, closing the file on her desk. "It's over," she said softly, "but I can't help thinking about how close we were to missing this. If Sam hadn't acted—" Anders nodded. "He's the real hero here. That little girl trusted him when she couldn't trust anyone else. That's what made the difference." On a crisp, sunny morning, Delilah visited her mother's grave for the first time. She carried a small bouquet of daisies and placed them gently at the base of the headstone. Claire stood at a respectful distance while Sam knelt beside her, his presence offering silent support. "I miss you, Mommy," Delilah whispered, her voice trembling. "But I'm okay now. I promise." Sam rested a hand on her shoulder, his eyes soft. "She'd be so proud of you, Delilah. You're one of the bravest kids I've ever met." As they left the cemetery, Delilah turned to Sam, her face brighter than he'd ever seen it. "Do you think I can be a bus driver one day like you?" she asked. Sam chuckled, ruffling her hair. "You can be anything you want to be, kiddo, and I'll be there to cheer you on." The story of Delilah Carter didn't just end with her rescue, it began with her healing. With the support of people who cared and a community that refused to turn a blind eye, she found a future where hope replaced fear. If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe in standing up for those who can't protect themselves? Hit the like button, share this video to spread awareness, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Together, we can inspire change, one story at a time.